Good evening, everyone. I'm Carolyn. Welcome back to Encounter Encouragement. I come to you tonight with a little bit of a heavy heart. A friend of mine just told me that he recently lost his dad. It's very, very hard on him. Unfortunately, I know what it's like to have lost a parent. In fact, both parents. And before that, I lost a sibling. So tonight I want to discuss the idea of support for someone who's going through a death or a loss of some sort, whatever it might be. When they need sympathy, they need your help. I'm going to start with some things to do, and then we'll go on to some things not to do when someone has lost a loved one. One thing that I've noticed in my losses, a big thing for me was make sure to acknowledge the person. For example, I very unexpectedly lost my brother. It's been over 28 years ago, but I still remember the feeling of not being acknowledged by a boss. So we'll go into that a little bit later and how not to do things. So in terms of acknowledging someone, what you need to tell them is, I'm so sorry for your loss. Acknowledge that you don't know what to say. For example, literally say, I don't know what to say. Because sometimes you just don't. And that's okay. Because sometimes people who are in that situation are not looking for you to say something or to fix them. They just want to know you're there. Tell them I'm here for you. Don't let them feel alone, because too often, if we don't acknowledge and we don't let them know that we are willing to listen, they will feel very alone, and this is certainly not the time that they need to feel alone. The second thing you need to do is listen. Let the person talk. Not all the stories that they tell are going to be sad stories and make you sad or bring them down and put them in the dumps and leave them there and expect you to pull them out. That's not the way it always works. Sometimes, yes, they will tell sad stories, but at the same time, they might tell funny stories. That's where the second point comes in. Encourage them to remember the good, fun times that they had. I will never forget when my sister was cutting my brother's hair. Obviously, we were much younger, but she had his hair up in pigtails, 2 pigtails on the top of his head. And we took pictures and we just laughed at the silliness of how he looked. So encourage them to talk about the fun times that they had together and to try to remember the lessons they learned from this person. That is something that will really help them get by and get through the situation, is what lessons did I learn from this person and what can I share with someone else who's going through this situation? Now, on to what not to do. Don't ignore the person. Again, going with acknowledging the person is don't ignore the person. My boss, at the time that my brother passed, we were expecting my dad to pass. And it was very sudden. We had a horrible week. My uncle had passed on Saturday. My brother passed on Wednesday. I found out while I was at my uncle's visitation. The next day was my uncle's funeral. The next day was my little sister's birthday and my older sister's graduation from nursing school and open house at my house. The Saturday was a day off. Sunday was my brother's visitation and the 1-year anniversary of his wedding reception. So on his casket, we had my picture of his wedding reception on his casket. And then the next day was his funeral on another sister's birthday. So on that Saturday, to take some time away from all the grief and just get away from everything, a friend of mine and I went to where I worked. It was a bar and restaurant, and we sat in the bar and listened to the music. There were about 7 or 8 of us at the table. My boss came up, and he greeted everyone at that table by name, shook hands with some of them, laughed, joked, hey, how you doing? and completely ignored me. Did not even acknowledge that I was at the table. That was so hurtful. It wasn't intentional because he didn't know how to handle it, but it was very hurtful. And it's 28 some years later, and I still remember how that felt. So be very careful to make sure not to ignore the person. Don't silence them. If they want to talk, let them talk. Let them talk about whatever they need to talk, and just be there and listen. And I know most of you have gone through a situation with the loss of a loved one. It's okay to acknowledge that person's loss right now by relating a story that we have regarding our loss, but don't take over the conversation. Right now, this is the time for that person to grieve. They need to grieve, and they need to do it in their own way. So don't take over the conversation, even though you have stories that will fit. Save them for a little bit later down the road. A month or two down the road, they're going to need your help. So don't forget to go in and check in with them, because after the funeral, it seems like everyone disappears, but that person still needs your support and encouragement. One of the big things for a takeaway here is be there and listen. I know that it's difficult sometimes because we get so wrapped up in their grief and their loss and how it affects us, and it is difficult. But be there and listen, even if you don't say a word. Listen and just be there. Sometimes they just need to be held. People might remember, but they might forget what you say, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And in a time of loss, you need to make them feel loved and wanted, supported, and encouraged. It's been a tough night, but I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to ask that you just remember these tips when someone else, tells you that they've lost a loved one. So thank you again, and I hope to be back soon. I appreciate you all listening, and until next time, have a blessed day.